All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to the first session of the PRCA APAC Pulse webinar series. This is part of the Public Affairs Group's effort to make policy more accessible to our PRCA community. I'm Marcus Lowe and I head up Public Affairs at Temus, and I have the pleasure of chairing the Public Affairs Group. Formed in June, we aim to create a space for deep dives, for cross-sector dialogue, and create a steady rhythm to track key policy and public affairs trends across our region. We're starting with a monthly webinar and newsletter by our community for our community. And I welcome you to like and subscribe to our channels, whose links can be found below. Today, we are focused on energy transition in Southeast Asia. We know power demand is rising, investments are growing, and investment interest is certainly there. But renewables adoption appear to remain quite uneven. Policy still varies from country to country and across ASEAN members. Now, to help make sense of these developments, I'm delighted to be joined by Finian Lim, Vice Chair of the Public Affairs Group and Head of Public Affairs from Trinasolar Asia Pacific. Finian has kindly agreed to anchor our very first webinar, and he'll give us an insider's take on this topic ahead of a closed-door session that he's hosting with the Sustainable Energy Association of Singapore. It's happening on the 22nd of July. Following our 20-minute conversation or so, Finian and I will be inviting questions from all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Just post your questions in the Q&A tab below, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. So with that, over to you, Finian.
Great. Thank you, Marcus, for the warm introduction and setting the stage so well. So it's a pleasure to be here today to share my thoughts on the ASEAN energy transition. So Marcus has already introduced me, just to give a bit color to who Trinasolar is. So essentially, we are a Chinese manufacturer. So we manufacture solar panels, battery energy storage systems, and we can do a one-stop solution provider as well. So in the next few minutes, I will walk through the region's evolving energy landscape, diving some context on the policies, technologies, what are opportunities and challenges. So what I will be sharing actually reflects my own professional perspective. I triangulated some of the consultancy studies and putting in some of the data points together. And it's also based on my conversation with the industry and policy stakeholders. So as what Marcus has mentioned, after the presentation, we'll move into the Fireside chat to take a deeper look at some of the discussion points. Hopefully today you can bring home some key takeaways. So let me get started. Okay, so I think the first question we'll start is by examining why energy matters in ASEAN and zooming out for a moment. I want you to think about it. For the past 20 years, we have grown to about 700 million people population. And the usage of electricity has, doubled across the whole ASEAN, and that is, massive. And the reason is also because there's rapid urbanization, industrialization. ASEAN is becoming factory of the world with the China Plus Plus strategy, and we also have a growing middle class. With middle class, we talk about more consumption of electricity from households to even electric vehicles and even your daily normal vehicles. And we are seeing the energy trend is growing by about 3% every year. Well, it might sound small to you, but over time, right, actually is huge. And we also need to be aware, coupled with the hidden costs, now with the proliferation of AI data centers, we are facing an accelerated increasing pace of energy. Just a simple kicker, right? A simple 100 words from ChatGPT that you use daily actually consumes half a liter of water and 0.14 kilowatt hours. So what this means actually is you can actually power 1 hour of your fan with this electricity. But with a few clicks, you are already consuming this amount of energy. And here is the big trade-off. ASEAN is facing huge growth. I think it's one of the spotlight region given the current geopolitics and geoeconomics. But all this growth, there's also facing a big trade-off, right? With more growth, more energy is good for us. But the growth is actually still heavily powered by by coal. Coal is cheap, yes, it's familiar. So it's one of the dirtiest fuel that we have. So if we want to grow, we have to think about how we can grow smartly, how we can grow cleaner. And an analogy is like, a baker. If you want to bake a cake using an oven, but imagine this oven you use, right? It fills the room with smoke, choking you. But if you want to change to a cleaner oven, it's more expensive, double the cost. Maybe it takes time to install. So that's exactly the challenge that, ASEAN is facing right now. So this slide essentially summarizes the reason why we are talking about renewable energy, why we are talking about sustainability. Essentially, is climate change. I think this is something that is not distant, it's real. And I think it might be familiar to most of you. So recently, there's also the high Manila shut down their school because it got too hot, 42 degrees Celsius. Children can't go to school, farmers can't, grow their crops. And then we have floods just in China, in Johor, and even in Singapore, right? When it rains heavily, there are a few regions whereby, there are floods. So the reason about energy transition, about clean energy, is really about, ensuring that our communities are safe, we can go to school, we can enjoy our daily life. It's really about how we can tackle these challenges. So now here's the silver lining, right? We used to say clean energy, people will think about first thing is cost, it's more expensive. Well, but that's no longer true, right? Thanks to technology and economy of scale, the industrialization that China has brought to the world, renewable energy is now the cheapest form of electricity in many parts of the world. In EU, let's say cheapest, yes. In countries like China and India, solar and wind are already beating coal in this price. In ASEAN, we are looking, just in the region like Indonesia and Japan, coal is still is still a bit cheaper, but I think not for long, right? The gap is closing fast, right? So if someone told you that we can't afford renewables, tell them, we can't afford not to because climate change is already at our doorstep. And the reasons why renewables are getting cheaper is because technology and innovation keeps improving. Every year, the pace of innovation is so fast. So take, for example, solar panels, something that we are very familiar in Singapore. The efficiency was 15%, and now we are talking about 24% within 10 years. It might sound 1% increase, a few percent is not a lot, but each percent is a generation gap. Those who do research will know increasing 1% takes a lot of investment, a lot of effort to do so. And this kind of innovation also means with a high power panels, it benefits areas like Singapore because we have limited land. With the same given amount of space, we're generating twice the amount of power. Likewise, for batteries, if you can see our EVs, they can go longer distance, they can charge faster. So technology is moving fast, we're not standing still. Every year, you will see significant improvement in technology year on year. So now with all these promising progress, wow, technology is cheap, it's easy to implement. So what is still holding us up, to scale renewable energy? So I want to take a quick pause and hear from you. So what is the biggest barrier today, you think? Could it be fragmented policy, the greed, lack of financing, or something else together? Maybe we take a moment to vote, right? I will vote too. Oh, they say hosts and panelists cannot vote. So okay, you have everyone, single choice. Yeah, you choose. All right. Can we close the poll? Great. Okay. Well, lack of capital and incentive. So okay, we have some votes across each of the option, and honestly, you are all correct. Because the truth is, right, it's not just one issue. It's a multi-layer challenge, 10 countries, 10 different playbooks, 10 different stages of development. So yep, so thanks for participating, and as you can see, whatever that you voted for is actually true. There's no single barrel. The reality is a combination, a confluence of factors that overlaps. But let's break them down. First of all, many countries are still growing fast. Indonesia, huge population, 280 million. They're targeting 300 million. Many countries still need affordable electricity. So just imagine today, your electricity bill increased by 20 to 30%. Will you want to pay? And then that also increased your cost of food, your standard of living. So there's a very delicate balancing act. While providing affordable energy, we also need to balance the need to transit. Fossil fuel. Just Indonesia alone, more than 50% of the power stations are less than 10 years. Imagine if you're the investors, you put in amount of money, you expect the returns. So there is some payback period expected, and hence they can't actually suddenly switch off the coal power plant. And all these jobs, there are millions of jobs tied to all these energy intensive sector. So it makes politically and economically tricky to do it. Third, uneven opportunities as a mismatch. So some countries, they have a lot of land, they have a lot of sun. Some countries, like Singapore, we have a lot of demand. So there's a mismatch. And we don't really have the infrastructure to do, all this matching of supply and demand. And lastly, yes, most of you voted money, capital. Capital is the lifeblood of development. Without capital, there won't be any projects. And investors usually, they go in with huge capital expenditure, millions, hundreds of dollars. And if they see that in the next 10 years, 20 years, if they can't get back the money, or they can't earn, they actually won't participate, right? So what we have together, I would call it in a way that is ASEAN, spaghetti. 10 different countries, 10 different rule books, different standards, making it hard to scale. But ASEAN is actually taking a phased approach, slowly, step by step untangling this web, and it's already happening. And it's actually a commendable effort. So with all these challenges, I want to take a look at where we stand. So this map actually gives a quick, overview. Most countries in Southeast Asia set their targets, between 30 to 50%. You can set any targets you want, right? So Philippines and Vietnam, they are aiming a bit higher. But the reality is, renewables only account about 15% of the total energy supply. And the target, they said is 23% by 2025, which is this year. They haven't really set a new target yet, but it's unlikely that they will meet the target this year. So the ambition is very clear. The gap is huge, the few percentage. So bridging the gap comes in, the policy financing. And in the next slide, I will share what ASEAN is pushing to really accelerate this, to accelerate this target. So one powerful solution that they are doing is the ASEAN Green. I think you have heard it from PM Lawrence Wong's speech, heard it from the media. They are doing this. It's like building energy highway, right? Expressway, KPE between different countries. Imagine if you take powers from Vietnam, take powers from Cambodia, and to share it within the region. So the grid will help to balance the supply and demand, right? Improve our energy security and resilience as the whole, as a region. And then, of course, reducing costs, because you are able to tap where the cheapest renewable and available energy is to match the demand. So it also means that we can develop renewable energy in remote areas. It doesn't have to be near the city. It doesn't have to be near demand. So essentially, this is a game changer. But it needs political will, investment, and regional trust, which again, ASEAN is really pushing very hard. So now we talk about the region. I want to do a spotlight on Malaysia. So Malaysia has been, gaining a lot of momentum. Why? They have set clear targets. They have implemented and executed a few consistent and practical strategies. Sometimes what we learn about here is that you don't really need a lot of combination of policies or complex. It takes well-structured, clearly communicated messaging to the public can really create momentum, like what we see in Malaysia. Net metering, which is, you are able to monetize, get money from your solar panels. They have public tender to create the demand. They have the CREST scheme, which allows direct PPA, which means you cut away the middleman, you're able to buy electricity from the demand source. And then, of course, CREAM, which is essentially this renewable energy program that allows you to lease out your rooftop, right, to a third party to earn some money. So Malaysia has started well, and just very recently, last month, they implement new policies, which we observed that it's natural progression from at the start whereby they want to kickstart the ecosystem, they throw in a lot of incentive to natural progression to be more market driven. So we see that they have pared down some of the incentive, but which is still okay. That it's still feasible. They are trying to test out whether the renewables can be more driven by the market itself. So next, let's take a look at Indonesia. Indonesia recently, they signed 3 MOU, and that is tremendous, the significant movement that we are seeing. The cross-border is a very encouraging step, right? It signals that the momentum is building for Indonesia. We are seeing that Indonesia really experience the S-curve. And to complement this, Trinasolar, like our company, we have invested. We have built a new factory to support the local manufacturing job creation. And Indonesia has all the land and population with the biggest market size in ASEAN. They have the sun, they have the wind, geothermal, you name it. They have 71 gigawatts of renewables. And to give you a sense of perspective, 1 gigawatt of renewables can power 800,000 households. So just 2 gigawatts alone, which Singapore, is setting the 2 gigawatts by 2030, can power the whole Singapore household of 1 million alone. And these efforts are supported by the government. They have good ambitions, and they are now they're focusing on how can they actually come up with the roadmap to implement 7 to 8 gigawatts on a year-by-year basis. And of course, Indonesia, they being they given there are 17,000 islands, the transmission lines is it's unlike Singapore, right? We're very centralized. So for Indonesia, it's very decentralized, and that creates a lot of logistics issues. And they have a very young fleet of coal plants, so they have to manage this transition carefully. And on top of that, we have the just energy transition. It's good that the international partners from different banks, they're putting in 20 billion commitment to help to see if they can shut off some of the coal plants early, how they can develop some of the renewables energy early on. So after seeing the progress across the nation, I'd like to share some of the actions that the ASEAN has already has been taking. First of all, I mentioned about the ASEAN grid, right? The cross-border Singapore is actually a first mover to show that this model is scalable and is feasible, right, through the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia link. And then we are also talking about bilateral subsea cables linking between Sarawak, Singapore and Vietnam, Singapore. These are on the horizons and essential to connect the demands within the region. Secondly, fast-track renewables permitting. It's like, if you want to develop a HDB project, right, there's a lot of licensing, permitting, you have to do site visiting. So it's likewise for renewables. There's a lot of processes that you need to clear. So if you can improve the regulatory, hurdles, streamline, you can fast-track them. Third, right, it's not about just creating the supply, right? We also control the demand, how we can boost the efficiency. For example, greener buildings, more efficient buildings, more efficient appliances, right? We have the climate change vouchers. Essentially, you have to purchase, more efficient DC fans or fridge. And fourth, capital. To mention, before capital is the lifeblood, we need trillions of dollars for ASEAN to really accelerate the whole renewable energy program. So in summary, the ambition is there, that the phase approach that ASEAN is taking is right, the direction is correct, and with continued effort and continuation, ASEAN can lead and provide a world-class model on how we can do energy transition. So to end off this sharing, I like to bring back, PRCA to the spotlight, the public affairs group like us, professions. So we are not just about, reacting and crafting messages, but there are a few roles that, public affair professionals can play in this energy transition, which I've put up in the slides. First is connector, right? You do a lot of mind sharing, you do a lot of engagement between the businesses and government. And then you can also play a role in tracking policies, monitoring tenders, what are changes, local content, so that you can mind share with the government on what is the optimal level to do some of this policy change. And lastly, application. How can we do better reforms? And through platforms like our PRCA, APAC, right, as an association, as a group, we can do collective voices and lobbying, advocating, whereby our voices can tend to be heard. So, without further ado, this will be the end of the presentation sharing.
Great.
And yep, proceed to
Thank you.
Fireside.
Thanks so much, Finian. I mean, as somebody who has been interested in the topic, but not one to maneuver in the field of renewable energy, this has been instructive. So thank you so much for giving us this overview, but at the same time, enough meat for people who are in this sector to get something useful. Especially with regard to the outlook and the road ahead. I've got some questions. While our participants take time to pump in their questions in the Q&A, I will exercise my privilege as chair to pose you some questions if you don't mind, Finian.
Sure.
Yeah,
Happy to answer that.
you talked about the ASEAN spaghetti. I like that. I like that analogy, right? It's like 10 countries, 10 rule books you mentioned. At the same time, you've outlined several priorities to accelerate ASEAN's energy transition. I mean, quite clearly, ambition isn't lacking. But, given the complexity of this effort for transition, what is your take on how ASEAN bodies, regional organizations, multilateral platforms can help to structure more viable public and also bring in the private sector, public-private partnerships, so that we can unlock progress and accelerate it?
Well, that's a great question, right? To unpack what we have shared earlier on. So regional platforms, they bring a very unique value proposition to this clean energy transition. Particularly in reducing the capital cost as in the costs, to develop, make the project more bankable as in, so that the project can be profitable. Investors are willing to pump in the money. And then, of course, we have multilateral platforms like the ADBs coming in. So I think there are three key roles which they can play to support the ASEAN decarbonization journey. First of all, they act as a partnership, collaboration platforms. So entities, what I can think of is like Infrastructure Asia. So they are a project facilitation office set up by Enterprise Singapore and MES. So they see at the intersection between government and private players, right? And their key role is to make sure that the structural bankable projects. And bearing in mind, a lot of these projects, right, it takes, the banks, the regulators, and then you have the suppliers, and two different countries coming in. So a lot of partnership, a lot of facilitation that's needed to kickstart the conversation. And I think they're doing a great job with their flagship forums every year, Infrastructure Asia Forum, right? To connect people, to come and build new bridges and talk about, what is the next projects they can do. Secondly, regional platforms like IEA, International Energy Agency, is here to help to develop policy frameworks. So policies are actually the foundations, of accelerating the energy transition in ASEAN and in each different country. So IEA, they have, they came to Singapore to set up their first overseas office outside Paris. last year. And they are working with closely with a lot of the ASEAN members, right, from Indonesia to Brunei, Thailand, Philippines, to develop policies for, renewables and also the ASEAN grid. And that will set the stage for scalable clean energy investment. And third role is about multilaterals. Multilaterals, we are talking about Asian development banks, the world banks, right? They can help to unlock blended financing, guarantees, and technical support. So blended financing in a layman term is a combination of private and public funds, right? Can be philanthropy, can be from foundations funds, equity and bonds and so on and so forth. So ADB actually has helped. I remember back in 2022 to facilitate and make a project in Cambodia came online. So Trinasolar was one of the developer. They came in to help to structure some of the concessionary financing, provide some technical assistance, due diligence, mitigate the risk. So the holistic approach is important, and it helps to make the project more bankable, make it profitable so that the private sector can participate. And it's this kind of modality that set precedents for the future renewable energy endeavors. So in summary, scaling the projects actually takes up ecosystems, different parties, so they can provide policy certainty, financial tools, and also partnerships to help private and public to move faster, to scale faster.
Okay, that's
a long
interesting.
answer.
No, I appreciate it, and you focused also on the cost element, which is why I think your point about capital and investment and involving multilateral institutions to help finance these mega infrastructure projects across ASEAN is going to be pivotal. So clearly, I think the part about cost competitiveness is going to be critical to our decarbonization journey as a region. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, if you don't mind, Finian. Give me some examples of these breakthrough clean energy technologies successfully deployed, yes, Singapore, other markets too, or even outside of, maybe even better still, outside of ASEAN, that we could possibly learn from. And they say imitation is a great form of flattery. Is there anything that we can imitate from the outside world for ASEAN?
Yeah, definitely. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel in this case, right? So what ASEAN wants is to adopt technology that is practical, deployable, and of course safely. So there are a range of clean energy. One of them is the nuclear, which Singapore recently has awarded 66 million rand for nuclear safety, but that is it is still quite far, a few years, as compared to those that's really readily deployable. So one example that we can think of is at a system level is smart microgrids. Microgrids, you imagine it like a small power plant. So it's combined a wind or solar power together with battery storage and digital control. And this system, microgrids, can power off-grid area, remote area that do not need to rely on the grid. And the beauty is it can connect directly to the demand source, like a data center or energy-hungry industry site. So technology has made that possible. Solar panels efficiencies has increased tremendously, 10% as over the last decade. The average cost of the solar panel has dropped more than 80% from the last 10 years. So, and they're saying that, in other parts of the world, they're using solar panels to build fence because it's cheaper to use the panels to build the fence than the actual metal. And then we are talking about battery storage. I think a lot of people, when they think about batteries, is EVs, right? I think BYD is the #1 brand now. So we are talking about large container-sized batteries when it comes to these mega projects utility scale. And lithium iron phosphate right now has improved. The technology has improved so much. Previously, we were talking about like 10,000 cycles, charging cycles, which can last about 5 years. Just recently, they announced, including Trina, that it can go up to 15,000 cycles, which means it can last up to 10 years now. And the longer it can last, the cheaper the cost you can bring the thing down. And that is only the hardware part. And software is key when you control, because the software actually helps to determine partially the cost of the electricity. Why is that so? With the proliferation of AI, right? Energy management system using AI. When do you forecast the solar output to be the strongest? Where is the electricity demand? What is the price trend? So using AI, now there's quite a bit of R&D to automatically adjust the battery usage to balance the supply and demand. And then that helps to maximize and lower the cost, whereby consumer can receive the lowest electricity cost based on certain inputs and factors. So hardware and software putting it together becomes an integrated systems, right? And ASEAN, I think they need this kind of integrated and system level to ensure that the projects that they do is reliable, is cost effective, and is safe.
And you mentioned earlier about this introduction of AI into that whole process. I think that really helps with the problems of intermittent supply and that matching, as you mentioned earlier, because we have observed how some markets experience brownouts because their grids are simply not ready for fluctuations in energy, both drawdowns as well as supply infusion into the grids. So that could be another one step ahead in a game changer from a technological perspective.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and so you also mapped out very ambitious targets, and I say very ambitious only because of how far we've come, and it varies from country to country. Some not very far, some on track. But given these ambitious targets of achieving sustainable or goals in sustainability, where do you see the most significant growth coming from in renewable energy for the region, let's say in the next 2-3 years?
Well, so from how I see it, right, I think the countries whereby we have strong growth and momentum is a country that has policy clarity. They are able to communicate their messaging well, that they have done the PR well, and there's also a demand pressure. I would say the whole region as a whole is doing pretty well and on track. But I would just highlight a few countries, right? The number one leader with already installed capacity is Vietnam. They're done at 16 gigawatts, but like you mentioned just now, the grid is an issue. Blackouts, the grid cannot take it because you have to upgrade the grid infrastructure to take in more power. It's still a bottleneck. But if they address it, we will see a second wave of growth coming in from Vietnam. And another country that I mentioned is Thailand. Thailand is another bright spot. They recently launched a tender early in the year. So they have trial like floating solar, like what Singapore is doing, right? And one of the hydro dams. And they have put in quite a lot of investment to upgrade their grids. And there's a lot of push, for private sector to really involve through competitive procurement and bidding. Malaysia, Indonesia, I mentioned in the slides, these are countries with good policies, and it's really growing. One of the hottest market which I have not mentioned is actually Philippines. Like the government actually has taken bold steps to implement the green energy auction every year. And of course, now it's in the early phase, right? They have awarded about 3.4 gigawatts of renewable energy. But this is a very big signal to the market, right, to create the demand, but also shows the government commitment to increase transparency, to really come and lay down the foundation so that the investors can come in. And the best thing, what I noticed, is there's a shift, right, towards 100% foreign ownership, which means, any the best players in the globally can come in and give the most competitive pricing to develop the projects. So each country, they have their opportunities. but they also face with their own very unique set of challenges, right? From unique to cost to coal plants. I think the next few years will be key, because it's really it's about scaling proven models, right? And also how they can unlock some of these opportunities through the battery storage, through transmission itself.
Mm. Great, interesting. So here's a question coming from a non-energy practitioner, but from the world of international relations. There is a thought leader in this field, Kenneth Waltz, who I've been reading just over this weekend. He talks about the need for states to achieve to survive, maybe to even thrive in this world order by internal strengthening, but at the same time increasing their relative capability in the structure. And he cites three things that states do to improve that relative capability. The first is how states organize their economic activities. Second, how do they translate science and technology into application? And third, to harness the secrets of nature. So I think by that he means, natural resources, things that we've been blessed with in the ground. Now, you talked about Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines. Singapore is a curious case in that context because, as we've been reminded time and again, we have no diamond, no gas, no oil. What is Singapore's role in this region's decarbonization plan to help achieve those ambitions that you mapped out?
Well, like you mentioned, right, Singapore is in fact actually the smallest country in ASEAN. We have no natural resources. And in terms of market demand, well, we are also one of the smallest, right? 2 gigawatts by 2030. One project in Philippines is already 2 gigawatts. But Singapore play an outsized role in ASEAN energy transition. Two key roles that I can think of. One is Singapore is as a catalyst, Singapore as a connector. So what Singapore did, right, with the cross-border, they are the first mover that allows, Thailand and Malaysia the power line. So they actually help to demonstrate that actually regional connectivity is possible and scalable. So they are also progressing, bilaterals projects on the side to make this happen. Then secondly, Singapore positioning as a green financing and innovation hub for ASEAN is crucial. So we have, the MES, right? They're championing sustainable finance, blended finance framework. And as we all know, funding large-scale clean energy across the region requires a large amount of capital. And this is important. And Singapore is also home, right, to a lot of pilot projects, carbon trading, renewable energy tradings, platforms that can also help to further, right, accelerate and expand this ecosystem across the Southeast Asia. Third, I think Singapore has also been investing a lot on grid digitalization, energy storage. I think these are important, right? So with digitalization, you can track your energy consumptions and generations. You can control them. And these research are also being shared, at the ASEAN level through capacity building, collaboration with, regional energy centers like ASEAN Center of Energy. So in summary, yes, Singapore acts as a catalyst and connector, right? It helps to unlock and, untangle the ASEAN spaghettis. It helps to perhaps, come up with some initiative to de-risk the investment and pilot solutions that other regions can, adapt to it. So its role, is more of a collective, making sure there's collective progression towards a more integrated, ASEAN and low carbon future.
Great. Thanks for putting that in context. There is a role that small Singapore can play. I think that platform and catalyst and connector role is particularly useful. Now I want to pivot to the business side of things. So amid all these changes, what do these shifts mean for jobs, for workforce development across the region? I mean, in the initial early days, when we talk about transitioning away from fossil fuel, from gas to renewable energy. Some of the concerns that were surfaced was where jobs were concerned, it's not easy to get someone to switch over from being a chemical engineer to being an electrical expert, or tech or IT specialist. It's not that easy to make that transition. So, Finian, I'd like to get your thoughts. How do you see this from a business perspective, and what do these shifts mean for jobs and the workforce?
Yeah, so I agree with you. That's the number one concern, right? When we talk about energy transition, is there business opportunity? What about jobs? Now jobs is the hot topic in Singapore and across the world. So actually, the opportunities are massive. When we talk about renewables, the first thing people thought is, manufacturing, or how to manufacture solar panels, batteries. Actually, if you look at the whole spectrum of renewable energy, the whole value chain, maybe I'll break it down into three parts, right? Upstream, midstream, and downstream. So the upstream, before we do any development, there's a lot of demand to support permitting, licensing, consultancy, financing, procurement. So these are business opportunity, right, that businesses can tap on. And of course, PR, public affairs, they need people who can navigate the local content, right, to do some of the key messagings. In the midstream, we talk about manufacturing, the engineering, procurement. So these are something that we are familiar with, the construction part. And then we have the downstream, the operations and maintenance phase. So it's just like HDB. You don't build and then you just leave it there. You need to maintain the asset to ensure that the projects still generate at an optimal level, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to these operations and maintenance, a lot of servicing required, that's required. And when we talk about jobs, right? I mean, our friends, right, in public affairs, PR, even legal, these are the professionals that mentioned. You really need them for like ESG disclosure. There's regulatories that you need to maneuver. And there's a lot of key messaging that you need to communicate. Because if you want to build a farm, a solar farm near some farmers, whereby they rely on these farms for their livelihood, then you need to come in to see how you can communicate with these farmers, right? To convince them that actually what we are doing is good for the country, it's good for it also create good jobs.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So to add on for the job front, there's this shift that's needed now. You're right, chemical engineering, and now with all these renewables and digitalization is more focused. There's a lot of demand for electrical engineering, but there's also a lot of demand for insurance, right? If you talk about, because we're talking about projects for 10 years, 20 years, there's a demand to insure, right, your assets. So imagine, I mean, the financial advisors you're doing for personal, or 1 to 2, but now it's hundreds of millions of assets. And then it requires risk analysis, consultancies. And then, of course, there's also business development, sales. These are green jobs, not just green jobs, but they are growth jobs. Definitely, some reskilling is required. So, they can go about doing internships or related, projects. And of course, I think companies like Trina, we are also on board Singapore initiative, right? The career conversion program, to see how we can onboard some of the professionals that are not from this industry, and to share. In fact, now there's the manpower is quite tight, especially for the renewables front, because a lot of the young graduates are people are chasing for that small pool of AI and tech jobs, like high-paying jobs. But actually, there is also quite a big, a big pool of jobs in renewables, which I mentioned across the supply chain, which is also it pays relatively well. Yeah.
Okay. Finian, I want to ask you something from our audience. I want to take this chance to surface a question from Ivy Sim. I think this is an interesting question. We often speak about multilateral platform like ASEAN, right? Many countries coming together, an ASEAN grid, for example. Ivy asked a question regarding something that's a little bit more bilateral. And she talks about our RE 100. So we talk about RE 100 aligned investments. She commented that as of March 2025, RE 100 doesn't recognize Singapore and Malaysia as being the same market. And considering the immense natural resources and capacity that Malaysia has, the constraints that Singapore is faced with, if they're not recognized as one market, it might be challenging for companies in Singapore to meet our renewables target if we're not able to leverage on the advantages of our neighbor. So this is more of a bilateral play. I don't think she's asking for a solution, but maybe a point of view, a comment from yourself, Finian. Any thoughts?
So yes, so this is one area that I think when it comes to recognizing is it relates to standards lah. Different countries recognizing different standards and certification. How do you quantify, one country's renewable energy output versus another? This is something that ASEAN itself they recognize and they are actually working on it. I don't have a solution like you say but this requires a lot of time to actually harmonize the standards between each country, and it's already happening. I think there are working groups that are working on it to see how they can accelerate this. So perhaps to Ivy from DHL, we can consider providing your perspective and voice to this working group to see and share your perspective and to see how we can then accelerate this sharing to recognize each other RE market. Yeah.
Okay, and Finian, maybe I will ride on that because you're co-hosting a forum on the 22nd of July with the Sustainability Association in Singapore. That's right. You want to just share a little bit about that and how that platform could potentially be such a forum where engagements could happen.
So thanks, Marcus. I will do a bit of advertisement, just a bit.
Go ahead. I mean, it's useful for Ivy's question, I think.
Yeah. So as the lead up to this event, right? Next week we're having this forum. So we are co-hosting with the Sustainability Energy Associations. We have brought on consultancy companies to give outlook on the APAC renewables market. And then it's followed by a panel session. So the panel consists of Jonathan from EMA. So Jonathan is also the ASEAN Council. And then we have from our own very Dr. Liu, expert in battery storage, and together with Tiago from a developer point of view. But what is most important is the networking. So based on the registration so far, I see that almost the entire ecosystem of renewables industry will be there, right? From the developers to we have financing advisory, Green Giraffe, from insurance companies and from suppliers, and then to regulators. We also have our regional embassies attending. So if you really want to know more and connect to the industry, I think this is a good chance to meet people across the whole spectrum of the renewable energy. And so you can scan the QR code and register. It's free.
Thanks, Finian. And I think we should recognize yourself and Trinasolar Asia Pacific for helping to make this happen and convening a forum like this. You talked about public-private partnerships. I think we're going even deeper than that because you're involving different members of the ecosystem to come together to try to arrive at a common understanding, and that certainly is the prerequisite for arriving at common standards. I have one more question in the Q&A, but I think you answered this earlier. You talked about EMA as a leading partner enabling the transition within Singapore and setting the pace maybe for other countries in the region. The question is really about, what about larger countries with a multi-layer bureaucracies? But you mentioned earlier Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, and you gave a bit of texture to how various local champions in government, policymakers are also doing likewise within their country. So I don't think we need to go into the answers. You have answered them, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I mean, the larger country, the largest is Indonesia, I mean, in ASEAN, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
yes, I think one of the answer that I mentioned, just a recap, is IEA lah. So
mm,
International Energy, they are working with the Indonesian government to see how they can unpack and streamline some of their policies. And I think that will help to streamline some of the bureaucracies and accelerate the whole renewable energy. So it's really an
mm,
ongoing effort, but it takes time, right? Like I mentioned, if you want to install a new oven, it takes some time to order the
mm.
oven and for the oven to be installed and operational.
That's right. That's right. And I guess you drew that analogy quite masterfully, because there's also no point working towards having our daily bread when we suffocate along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, you can't
great,
even eat your
great.
bread.
That's right. All right. So it's 11:52. I'm just mindful of time. Thanks, Finian. I'd like to invite you to maybe answer one last question, that brings us back to public affairs professionals. What's one thing, in your view,
Mhm.
public affairs leaders should be doing right now, to support this energy transition for their own markets, and maybe even better still, if possible, for Southeast Asia as a whole?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. So to close things off, to keep it short, right? I think one thing that public affair can do is really to engage the stakeholders from be it government, from industry leaders, to really help to connect the dots, to mind share about renewables, right? Is here to stay. What are some of the policies that works? What are some policies that doesn't work? What is the optimal kind of regulatory lens procedure that you should implement? And I think for larger companies, it's easier. But for smaller and medium-sized enterprises, I think you can write on platforms like PRCA APAC, like our public affairs group. We can have a collective voice. We can collect some of the perspective and then advocate as an association, whereby the chances of being heard is likely to be higher. So I think if we can play this role well, I think we can play a meaningful role in ASEAN transition. And I think at this critical juncture of global context, right, ASEAN is facing a moment of truth. And I think public affair can be part of, making it a success story for the region.
Okay, thanks, Finian. I think that is a wonderful way to end this chat. And I'd like to just summarize some key takeaways that I got. I was just taking down notes simultaneously, as I said, as somebody who's not from the energy field. I just summarize it in 3 points, and these 3 points so happen to map back against ABC. The first point that I took away was that there's really no lack of ambition for this transition to happen. The challenge was previously that these conversations seem to be quite zero sum. You talked about, there is no lack of demand pressure in our region, in countries. At the same time, there is costs attached to this increased consumption. There's a cost to growth. There are certainly trade-offs, and I love your analogies about the cleaner oven, the liter half a liter of water per query on ChatGPT, and analogies like that. So conversations have largely revolved around a zero sum context. But that's it. So that's A, there's no lack of ambition. But B, um, you also was able to bring to spotlight breakthroughs. And I think this is where the optimism comes from.
Yeah.
There is a breakthrough in the technological sphere. We've heard about the solar breakthroughs in technology. You also talked about artificial intelligence in helping us to regulate supply and demand, and that is a prerequisite for an electricity grid to work efficiently, effectively, and reliably. And then secondly, there is also breakthrough in investment. So we think about different investment instruments, the bringing in of multilateral institutions for lower cost capital and to catalyze investments in this different big massive infrastructure. And finally, we also looked at breakthrough in policy. And in your words, you use the term policy clarity. And I think these three, amongst many other elements within that's happening in ASEAN, offers a great level of optimism in us breaking through that zero-sum mentality to hopefully spur that transition. And finally, I'll end off with C, and that is also that appetite for a culture of collaboration. Clearly you looked at interstate projects that are already underway. You mentioned the ASEAN grid. There's also those subsea cables that will connect states and hopefully integrate us even closer together. And at the same time, you also mentioned intra-state within our own jurisdictions. Singapore EMA, you cited that, and Singapore also trying to go beyond intrastate to interstate, where you talked about being a catalyst, becoming a connector, and serving as a platform for the region to bring the region closer together. So I think that there's no lack of ambition. These breakthroughs in tech investment and policy, and at the same time that fostering of the culture of collaboration offer us a note of optimism, I think, moving forward, that we should remain quite positive in spurring ASEAN's energy transition. And of course, you closed off with the role of public affairs, serving as connectors, as navigators, as advocates. And I think you're right. I mean, absolutely right, because while we see quite a bit of upsides, we also see that probably the biggest risks that could derail or slow these ambitious projects down is geoeconomics, geopolitics. And in many ways, geopolitics needs to be assuaged, or we need to help our enterprises that we represent navigate these geopolitical winds by helping them to get connected with stakeholders, by helping policy to be made clearer, but at the same time to feed back inputs into policy so that together we can navigate these geopolitical headwinds a lot more astutely. So I hope I've been able to reflect and summarize what you've very articulately put together, Finian.
Yes, actually, you have summarized it very elegantly and beautifully. So there's an excellent job in summarizing, and I hope today's session, able to provide some key takeaways, and give you a better understanding, a flavor of the ASEAN energy transition, the current state, the technologies, opportunities, and as well as the challenges.
Great, thank you, Finian, and you have also kindly offered to make your presentation available to our participants. The PRCA APAC team will be sending out a survey to all of you. Upon completion of that survey, you'd be able to download Finian's presentation for free. I think it will be useful in helping to make sense of this progress that the region is making in energy transition. Great. So before we close, I just want to spotlight what's coming up for the PRCA APAC Public Affairs Group, if you don't mind. Our next monthly pulse and webinar will spotlight how F1 Singapore and the broader tourism, lifestyle, and entertainment economy are going to be raising the visibility of Singapore and ASEAN on the world stage. We will, I think, be hoping to feature some insights from TrueScope. And we have Tiffany from TrueScope on our committee as well. We could potentially also feature reports from agencies like We Communication, whose managing director also sits in the public affairs group. And I think collectively we would be able to shed some light about what brands can do to take advantage of the upcoming F1 race that will happen in the September season. We also encourage all of you to mark your calendars for the Corporate Affairs Forum 2025, and that's taking place on the 8th of October this year. It's a signature event organized by Public Affairs Asia, and the Public Affairs Group in PRCA is supporting it. It's an event that will convene around 200 senior leaders in communication and public affairs from across the region. They will all come to Singapore at the American Club. So I encourage you to mark your calendars and join us if you can. And lastly, if you haven't already subscribed to the Public Affairs Group Monthly Pulse, our newsletter, please do so. And if you want to join our next free webinar, please sign up in advance. I think the links will be out quite soon, so keep a lookout for that. And it's, I guess, our small and modest way of trying to stay connected with one another, help each other to stay informed, abreast about all these issues that are shaping our own markets and our own region. Oh, there you go. That's the Corporate Affairs Forum on the 8th of October. So please feel free to sign up. All right. So with that, Finian, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to be our anchor webinar speaker, our first. And I think together we'd be able to bring value to our PRCA community by helping the community make sense of all of these interesting public affairs trends and developments that are happening across our region. Thank you, Finian, for joining me today.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
All right. Thank you. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.